The views and opinions expressed on the Nurses Station are those of our hosts and guests.
Not necessarily the views of Emory University,
Donnell Hodson Woodruff School of Nursing,
or Emory Healthcare. Enjoy the show. So welcome to the Nurses Station show. We're so glad that you decided to come and listen with us today and join us for our discussion about resiliency and burnout. Remember that you can follow us at nursing.emory.edu, or you can also find our podcast on any of the places that you download podcasts. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is unfortunately something that nurses deal with quite a bit, burnout. And our guest today is going to be a very special guest. We'll wait to introduce him a little bit later. I think you'll find he's very important to us in the nursing profession. And so today we're going to have Dr. Roxana Chikas, Dr. Tim Cunningham, Dr. Carolyn Clevenger, and myself just share with you our thoughts about burnout. So since we have such a busy show today, we're just going to jump right in. So just in general, how's everybody doing?
Great.
All right. Yeah.
Doing good? Are you burned out? Let's just start with that. Are you burned out? If so, tell me why, and just spill the beans.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little?
I don't know that anybody who's really burnt out wants to call themselves burnt out. I mean, to me, it almost feels like I'm giving in if I fully own that. I'm a little crispy around the edges sometimes, though.
Yeah, that's so true. There's such a stigma around it. And we're supposed to be like successful, thriving, high-functioning people. And if we say that we have burnout, like that could be taken the wrong way. By our bosses, maybe, right? By our leaders, by if people hear, Tim said he's burnt out, that means we can't rely on him to keep doing what he's doing. Or maybe people are going to worry about me. Or, we put all these thoughts out there that probably don't even exist. I don't know.
By our patients, right? Because we're supposed to be very strong and like be able to help patients through really difficult times. So
let me ask you, what is burnout? I mean, we're talking about it, loosely, but what do you define burnout as? What does that mean?
There's so many definitions out there. One thing that I love about one of the main definitions of burnout in healthcare is that it's a work-related syndrome. And I think maybe as we talk about it today and we dig in, like keeping it focused on knowing that it's related to work. We might feel burnout in like home settings and outside of work, but we also know that with burnout, it comes from work. And so we got to do something about it in the work setting so that we can help support each other. I don't know. What do you all think? Are there other ways that you think about burnout?
That's a great point. I think, sometimes when you maybe have a shorter fuse than usual, or, you just don't have that same level of empathy and compassion that you want. Or, I also hear people use the word compassion fatigue. I'll throw that out there.
Oh, yeah.
I hate that word, by the way.
Really?
I mean, I don't know if it's too early to jump on board, but I think compassion fatigue, we got to talk about that today.
Okay.
I think it's misleading.
So it's okay. What is compassion fatigue, Tim?
All right.
And why don't you like it?
All right. And in this episode, you all might have to hold me back because this is what I'm passionate about. This stuff, this burnout, compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue, like all of that stuff. Did a lot of research on it and see it every single day. Okay. So compassion fatigue, it's this idea that by being compassionate all the time, all day long, and if we think about nurses in a clinical setting, you give, you go. Compassion fatigue suggests that you might run out of the ability to be compassionate for someone else. You might run out of that energy to provide compassion, and you might run out of that space to truly give good care. But I'm going to suggest compassion fatigue is actually impossible. That you can't.
Think it's impossible?
Yeah, I don't think you can run out of compassion.
Well, but does that? I don't think compassion fatigue means that you're going to run out of it. It's just saying that because you provide so much compassion constantly that it can be draining. Yeah.
And I that's what a lot of people say, I think about it, Lexi. But if you look at some of the neuroscience around compassion itself is actually not draining.
It's rewarding.
It's rewarding. Yeah. Yeah, it's fulfilling.
It is, but I don't know, Tim. I think I might slightly disagree with you on it because I'm a very compassionate person and I love compassion in and of it. Maybe we're saying the same thing. Are you saying that compassion in and of itself is not draining?
I'm saying compassion in and of itself is not draining. It's a human characteristic and ability. And I think some animals can experience it and give it too. But compassion in its best form is not draining, but empathy is. Can I have 3 minutes to try to convince you?
A minute and a half, go.
Let's see what happens. Minute and a half, go. Okay, I'm gonna talk extra fast. So we've got empathy and we've got compassion, right?
Okay.
We as nurses, in whatever role we take as nurses, know that we move forward into this work because we are about connecting with people. As researchers, we're about connecting. Roxanne, I think about you working with the farm workers that you're doing research with right now. How do we connect? Carolyn, how do you connect with your students? Lexi, your students, the mamas that you're helping bring a life into the world. We're all about connection. And if you watch someone's brain when they're connecting, you can do this under MRI, functional MRI. If I am watching you, for example, Lexi, get someone prick you in the finger with a sharp needle. If I watch that happen to you, my brain lights up in the same regions as if my own finger was getting pricked by that needle. Like you can measure that. It's an fMRI. And in that way, I'm seeing your pain and essentially I'm feeling your pain. And that's a defense mechanism. That's the human evolved brain to say, next time I see a needle near my finger, I'm gonna pull my finger away because I saw Lexi get hurt by that. I don't wanna do it. So that, let's consider empathy, feeling someone else's pain. Now, go back to your work setting as nurses. If every single day we're experiencing someone else's suffering, in hearing their stories, in helping provide care, we are seeing that, we're feeling their pain, we're experiencing that. Over time, we're gonna wear out. So I consider that empathy fatigue. Let's take it to the next level of compassion. All right, so we got empathy fatigue. Throw compassion fatigue out the window. There's some researchers that might hear this and might not be happy about this. But if we look at the neuroscience of compassion, there was this really interesting study where a bunch of people actually sat in an fMRI and they watched people get injured. Their brains lit up the empathy regions as if they were feeling that pain themselves. These folks then went through compassion training for a few weeks, went back in the fMRI, saw another image of someone experiencing suffering. And this time, and this is statistically significant, this time when they saw the suffering, the empathy regions lit up a little bit, but even more so, regions in the prefrontal cortex, which are associated with creativity, lit up significantly more. Like the brains of the people that had compassion training were going crazy in these regions that are associated with creativity and sometimes even joy from creativity. Not joy that I'm seeing someone suffer, but joy that I know I am a capable human being. I see an issue and I know that I can do something to fix it. And so to that end, compassion inspires us to make a change. Now, we could get tired, but I'm going to argue it's not compassion that's wearing us out. It's broken health systems.
Okay, broken
that
health
was more
systems.
than 3 minutes.
No, it was beautiful. I mean, we're just trying to kind of put it all together because I think sometimes compassion and empathy, we kind of flip-flop those.
For
so
sure.
Would you say compassion is just, you see something, you can understand it, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily feel it. As opposed to empathy is more you kind of like really feeling what the person's going through.
I think that's it. Yeah.
I think compassion is an act. It moves you to act, to do something. And empathy is just the feeling.
Yeah. The Dalai Lama says compassion is a verb. And I think that's it. Like when you're doing something about it, but maybe even thinking about it, I am using the skills that I have to try to create a new pathway for this person I'm trying to care for. That's compassion.
I understand. So when we're talking about nurses, let's pull it all together. So that's one aspect, right? We have the emotional, how things pull on us, but what else is contributing to burnout for nurses? What are the nurses telling you, Tim? Or
I'm hearing
Carolyn?
I'm hearing a ton about broken systems. I'm hearing a ton about inefficiencies. I'm hearing a lot from nurses, and this is even before COVID, about I signed up to do this job. But before I can do this job, I've got to check all these boxes. I've got to do all this charting in the electronic medical record that our doctors are also doing. And I don't know who's reading what because it's double charting. And I have to jump through all these hoops before I can step into the bedroom of the patient that I want to care for and sit next to them and hold their hand and give them compassion. So I think for me, it's barriers. I don't know, Carolyn and Roxana, do you hear other things?
No, I think there definitely is really a ton of frustration when you want to act, you want to enact the compassion that you were trained to do, that you know you are capable of doing, and then these systems are in the way. There are also some sort of being in the workplace, I think, that affect all of us. We had a speaker at Emory earlier this year who talked about burnout specifically for advanced practice providers, so nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And one of the things that I took away, because I heard it and I thought that's the thing. This is definitely contributing. It's the role ambiguity, the not feeling like you belong in either camp, and getting pushback both from the nursing workforce, who want to sort of push this piece, especially for nurse practitioners, more so than our physician assistant colleagues, of, we want you to be more nursey, whatever that means, as though you're not. And then from the physician providers, because you're not a physician, so you sort of sit in this in-between world, and you don't have, I think, that teamwork, that collegiality that probably offsets some of those frustrations on a typical workday.
Roxana, what do you think?
I was just thinking about the feeling of powerlessness, where you know that there are barriers, a broken system, but you can't fix it in that moment, right? Because we want to fix things in that moment. And listening to Carolyn describe that kind of being in limbo, you're not from either group, reminds me of DACA students, dreamers, who are kind of like in that limbo also, and in a system that I've been in before. It really kind of weighs on you.
Mm-hmm. What about, I know we're kind of mostly talking about clinical, our examples, but let's broaden it a little bit, because the nursing profession covers a lot of different areas. And from what I hear people telling me, there are a lot of people burned out in academia, in leadership. Can you all speak to maybe how that's been, or things you've heard, or kind of why that might be?
I think there are some similarities, right? So you want to connect with students, you want to support them, and then there are these other factors around being able to do that, whether that means right now, the level of support that you have to do your online education, but before that, there are so many faculty. I enjoy large lecture courses. I love doing them.
Me too.
Yeah, there's a certain flavor to it though. And, you kind of have to set things up like that. But I have colleagues who that's not their comfort zone, and they do small group seminars, which are also very meaningful, but there's a lot more of that connection with students. So I've always felt like when I was doing a lot of teaching and less practice in administration, I almost like to balance the large lecture with either a clinical group or a seminar group, where you can still have that kind of connection with students. You get the sense that you really are, and this sounds so lofty, imparting knowledge. But you really are contributing to this person's development. You're helping them evolve and change, which is why you go to school. That's why you further your education, because you hope to do that so that you can then make an impact. And so some of our relationships get impeded by the way we've structured higher education as a business.
Yeah, I think healthcare too is structured as a business in a lot of ways. And if you think about that, in a business model, you have supply and demand, right? But if you structure healthcare like a business, supply and demand means you need sick people to keep your business running. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I think, Carolyn, you get to this great point. There are these systems and structures created that were created at one point and sort of evolved over time with control, without control, sometimes with negative ambitions. So few people can profit over others. Sometimes people just lost track of it. And one thing that I've been witnessing with nurses, especially with COVID in academia and also clinically, is that nurses are finding some really creative ways to push against it. Yeah, for sure. I know we're going to jump into the resiliency, but I'm not quite done with the burnout. But I love resiliency.
I know, we're going to get to the positive, right? That's what we do at the nursing station. We talk about both sides of it, but I still feel like we're skirting around the issue. I feel like, let me just say how I feel about the situation with burnout. I think that our profession is like a runaway train in all areas, meaning we have good intentions. We want to help grow our students. We want to help our patients, but we just go full steam ahead. I mean, we just push and push and push. And this last year of COVID, I mean, I'll just speak from the academic side of things. Whereas the rest of the university might have kind of had a lull, we are the nursing school and even the School of Medicine. We don't have a choice. We still have to produce clinicians. And so there was this pressure. It's like, let's get them trained and let's do it now. Like COVID hit, everybody's world fell apart, but we still were like, okay, let's take away spring break and let's turn everything around online and let's just do it. And everybody jumped on board with it. But then that turned into, okay, here the summer semester is, let's bump the summer semester up by a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. So all the faculty is like, I'm still in the spring semester that started off face-to-face, that shifted online. And now I have to put my courses together and lose the weeks in between, right? So we pummel through the summer. And then here comes fall, same thing, bump into fall. As a matter of fact, the fall semester needs to be done by Thanksgiving. So what I see is, and there has not been a complaint, right? Nurses, we do what we have to do because we want to get the job done. But what happens is you burn the workforce, because burnout to me is where you start to just have this emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that even when you sleep, even when you exercise, even when you try to do all the things to correct it, it just does not go away because there is this constant pressure to keep going. I feel like in our culture, American and nursing, we don't allot for rest. If you look at every other culture, there's a period of work and there's a period of rest. I don't see that at all anywhere. And I definitely don't see it in the nursing profession. So I feel like our profession is setting us up for burnout. Yeah. All joking aside, I love being a nurse, but it's setting us up to burn out because I don't see where the balance is. And I don't think nurses should have to be just resilient. We're going to talk about that, Tim. But is it on the nurse to just come up with resilience and the system keep moving forward like it is?
But what do you suggest would be a solution?
Required vacation. Like you have vacation days, right? You should, just like I have to document that I have to get training and whatever, and I have to do all these things for my annual review, I should also have to show that I took my vacations. I should have to show those things.
There is a nap ministry here in Atlanta. Have you all heard of this? It's
a nap ministry?
A nap ministry, and it's all about encouraging people to take a nap. And it's run by artists who, and I believe one is an Emory grad, who they do these nap installations around the city where someone in this beautiful setting is just napping in public. Because they say napping is it's a push against the system that is set in a way that I don't know, Lexi, I think it's based in fear. Why are we so burnt out? Because I think there's fear in a lot of aspects that if we don't do good enough, if we don't work fast enough, if we don't work hard enough, someone's going to get ahead. And I think that systems in this country across the board, inside and outside of healthcare, and that fear makes us think we have to do all of this stuff. And then we find ourselves burnt out.
You mean fear? When you say fear, you mean like that someone else is going to get ahead of you?
Yeah,
fear?
I think it's competition. I think it's fear. Yeah.
Mm. Also though, if you think, so I thought you were going to talk about the nap studies during night shift. So 20-minute naps, sleeping sessions actually improve alertness and patient safety outcomes for patients on units from staff working night shifts. So I was also thinking about not necessarily fear that someone else will get ahead, but it's sort of fear of a bad outcome, fear something bad's going to happen to my patient on my watch. And we tied, again, we spoke about this in a previous episode, we tied nursing to the tasks sometimes. And if you could let that get into your head, then more tasks, doing more, getting a lot of things done, maybe that leads then to patients being safer, patients staying well, having better outcomes. There's also that fear, like I'm not going to let bad things happen on my watch. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to do.
Yeah. And what do you get when you just do all the time?
I'm afraid we're going to have a body fluid comment.
Oh, no.
It does become fluid. It's diarrhea, right? It's just nonstop do.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, Tim. That's a good one.
Since you mentioned diarrhea.
Oh no. It's been coming
I would like to know what everybody's like bodily fluid that they just cannot take.
They cannot
the one that burns me out?
Burns you out, yes. The one that just...
Bodily fluid burnout.
If I had a shift full of this body fluid, then I would quit nursing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. What's your fluid, Lexi?
Vomit and spit. Like when you do a trach suction, that sound of that, I cannot do it. I don't need the.
Like that kind of?
Yeah, or vomit is okay, but it's the smell that comes from it that I can't really.
Smell can be a lot.
No.
That's fair.
How about you, Roxana, since you posed the question?
Feces.
Really?
And yeah, so like when I was a nursing student, I think like on my second or third clinical day, I went into a room to help a nursing tech change a patient who had had a bowel movement. And he was like 18 years old and his mom was in the room and I'm just holding the patient while the nursing assistant cleans him. And I was like, I'm just not going to breathe because of the smell. And at some point I was like, I'm going to have to breathe. And for some reason I thought it would be the best idea was to breathe through my mouth. And I did that. And then it was like, I could taste it. And like, my eyes were like watery and and because the mom was there, I was like, I have to maintain composure because she's going to feel awful if I just start like vomiting all over the place. And so I just was using every like restraint in me. And as soon as she finished, I just walked out the door and was like,
Is that the day you decided to go into research, Roxana?
I feel you, Roxana. My first clinical was on a GI floor, and I was like, I've made a mistake. Like, I'm in nursing school, and I've made a mistake. But then after I started delivering babies, poop is a part of the process. So then I got over poop.
That's the thing. You
just knock it out the way.
A little more exposure helps a lot. Sputum used to be my thing, but then I did LTAC, long-term acute care units with the clinical groups for a couple of years. And there's just something actually very gratifying about getting a big bunch of sputum out of that trach. When you're sectioning somebody, you're like, yeah, clean it out. Like it just.
No, I don't think so. I'm sorry.
It's great.
That does not make me feel resilient as a nurse. None at all.
Oh, it's a win.
You know what made me feel really resilient when I was practicing clinically? I was the barf catcher. Like in the emergency department, people would roll in and you don't always know what's going on with somebody in the emergency department. They might not look good. They might look a little pale. Their vital signs might be off. But I developed this sense that like when someone was about to rolf, whether it was coming out this way or the other way, I would have a bedpan in my hand. And before they could even be like, it'd be in front of them and I would catch every splatter.
Like the Captain America shield.
I'd walk out of the room with the bedpan over my head, be like, I caught this. No one got messed. And then I trip and spill it. But
it's really that type of stuff that keeps us resilient as nurses. Like,
it is.
Like getting the IV when nobody else can get the IV and then they call you and you get it. You're like, I got it. That's how we remain resilient, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
and the jokes you have.
Yeah, so since we're talking about body fluid resilience, amniotic fluid is like my thing. I love it. Like if a mom comes in, no, I'm just saying, like when we're thinking about from a nursing perspective, the things that make me happy, that help me keep going. When a mom comes in, her water breaks or like, I don't know, it pops and it's just like, yes, so it's getting real, So Tim.
Am I turning green? I feel like I'm turning.
No, it's a midwife thing. Stuff is really like, happening.
It's flowing.
So it's not the same effect for you. Okay, it's just a midwife thing. Okay, well.
Fluids that bring joy though, right? It's finding that joy. Any other fluids that bring you all joy?
No, it's like, I'm glad when my patients are having bowel movements. That means I did my job. I'm like the constipation fairy. I did geriatrics, y'all. Things slow down.
Yeah, that's true. The little things in life. Let's just segue into real resilience. I know we spent about 5 minutes, way too long on that. All right, so nurses get burned out, various different areas. Okay, so how are we remaining resilient? Because I feel like in the school of nursing, everybody's doing everything with a smile. We might say, oh, they're pushing us to do this, but we are glad to do it, right? Because we know we're providing a service. And so what do you think nurses are doing to remain resilient? Or what is it about our profession that we have inherent resilience, I believe?
So I think we've been doing it since the beginning of this profession. I firmly believe that, but I also firmly believe that we haven't given resilience that microphone to say, this is what we're doing. We haven't given it that space to celebrate it and recognize it as a key part of our profession, but nurses have been doing it. And I also people have been doing it. since the beginning of time. I think of my friends and my colleagues of color who have been resilient their entire lives because of the country they live in, the way they've been treated by what they look like or who they choose to love or what they choose to believe in. Like, resilience is an inherent human thing. And I think where we've failed as a health system, as health in America, is that we haven't recognized it and we haven't celebrated. So what if I don't know, I'd like to put out there that we begin from a place of we're already doing it. And it's all about defining it and making sense of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what is, it makes sense to me. What exactly is resilience? I mean, we're throwing it around, but what does it mean?
Yeah, so resilience is the ability to face adversity and creatively do what you need to do to be your best self. It's maybe bouncing back, but I think bouncing back is kind of a cliche. Like, oh, I get knocked down, I bounce back up again, and I ain't never gonna tell me no. Like, no, it's not that. It's because we can't always bounce back to 100%, especially in the times of COVID. If we're thinking healthcare, we're exhausted. But what if we can bounce back to 60%? So bounce back, it's more about how do I experience the situation and reframe it for myself and for others, or let others reframe it for me, so I can be my best self and be the stellar human I need to be.
Yeah, I think though, I just want to make sure we touch on this point. I think we all agree, but I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. Burnout is a work-related symptom. We have systems that contribute to that greatly. And I want to make sure we don't then expect the individual nurse to cope with it by building resiliency as the individual, right? So we have a system-related problem. The solution cannot just come back to the nurse growing in their resilience. Not that that's not part of it. I just want to make sure we don't sort of say, this is on you to take care of yourself better.
And that's exactly where we've gone wrong historically. And that's what's exciting about, especially thinking about our new nurses listening in. This is the change that you all need to make. And this is the change that we're working on making as leaders now. We're quite a few decades behind, but it should not rest on the shoulders of our nurses, period. Because there are so many other factors. And one way that we can change it, here's a great thing about COVID, and I thought I'd never say that, a great thing about COVID. One great thing about COVID is that as we're learning about resilience, there's this thing called post-traumatic growth that we're hearing from our clinicians more and more and more. And post-traumatic growth is this idea that when you're experiencing burnout or trauma, what is happening sort of on the positive side coming through? It's not to negate all the negative that's happening, but it's also shedding a light on saying, hey, let's recognize we're able to tell a fart joke in the middle of a really serious conversation. Let's recognize that we as a team still have the ability to laugh, even though the US just recently hit 200,000 deaths because of COVID. Post-traumatic growth helps us look at what are the new possibilities that have come up because of the suffering, the shared suffering that we've been through. And then what do we do with those new possibilities? So like, what's the new creative way? What's the deeper relationship that you've experienced with your team, your family members? What are other relationships that have ended because of COVID? That's okay too, because that's made me a better person, right?
Yeah.
What are new strengths?
And Tim, I want to ask you one more question, being the Vice President of Practice and Innovation, right? So have you talked with your nurses? Have you had conversations with the nurses about how they're approaching this or how they've grown since COVID?
I have. I've had lots of conversations, daytime, nighttime, meeting with groups of nurses, individual nurses. And one thing that I try to do in my current role is not prescribe anything to anyone. So I set up these conversations and just to listen and ask what's going on. And what's been fascinating is that the conversations begin with, I'm exhausted, I'm fatigued, I'm scared. And then as our nurses continue to share, they turn the conversations themselves to, but I feel stronger. I feel like a badass right now. I never knew I would be able to do this kind of work. And I'm proud of myself and I'm proud of my team. Our nurses who have spiritual practices, religious practices, have said across the board, my faith is deeper. My community, my at the mosque, at the temple, at the church, whatever my faith community is, I feel so much stronger and connected with that. So again, like it comes out if we create the space for it. And then as leaders and researchers and teachers, how do we recognize that space and really help amplify that? Because you can teach resiliency practices, but I don't think you can teach resilience. I think that's something that arrives and develops in your own self. Mm-hmm. But you can surely set up the stage for it.
Yeah, that's good. I love it. I was going to ask Roxana to chime in on this if she had any ideas about how we could do that, what Tim is talking about on a larger scale. Like, what would that look like? To tie in what Carolyn also said, that it's not just on the individual nurse. How do you take what both Tim and Carolyn shared, and what would you see, Roxana, as how we could do this or incorporate that on a larger scale?
Yeah, so I think that one of the reasons that there is burnout is the sense of powerlessness and not seeing kind of like nurses in leadership kind of lead. Or nurses being excluded from, like, for example, there was a list that was just released on who are the best people to listen to on COVID-19, and there wasn't a single nurse on there. And so I think that contributes to burnout. So I think that one of the ways to kind of help with this resiliency is for nursing leaders to kind of show up and bring their own, make their own table for nurses so that we are empowered to have our voices heard. Because oftentimes I don't think people really listen to us or people in power. And so, I think it's really just taking the power.
Right. Take the power.
Yeah.
Take the power. Take it, nurses. Well, and speaking of power and influence, I think this would be a good time to introduce our guest speaker that I alluded to at the beginning of the episode. So today we have the esteemed Dr. Ernest Grant, who is the president of the American Nurses Association. And he's agreed to come on today to talk with us about nursing and resiliency and burnout and a whole host of different topics. So we're so happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, great. So do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and kind of what you've been up to?
Certainly, I'll be happy to. I'm Dr. Ernest Grant, president of the American Nurses Association. I have the distinct honor of being the first male president of ANA and the 125-year history of the organization, and only the third African American to hold this position. What have I been up to lately? You name it, I probably have been doing it. Let's see, obviously trying to tackle COVID in so many different ways, meeting the needs for nurses that are out there. We do a poll every other month about nurses and asking nurses what it is that they need or what they're seeing happening as a result of COVID. Overwhelmingly, it's coming back that it is, the PPE shortage and a few other things. But interestingly, and I'll be discussing this a little bit later on during my lecture, we also just completed one that looked at the financial impact of COVID on nurses. And particularly, there's a huge statistically significant difference between the African-American and Hispanic nurses versus white nurses as it comes to what COVID has done. Actively working on Capitol Hill to try to get more legislation and funding passed to, into the supply chain and things of that sort. Still trying to run an association
Right.
in between all of that. And of course, ANA is, we do a lot of international work as well with the International Council of Nursing. So you name it, we're pretty much there. And also trying to get more nurses engaged in the political process, trying to get them to obviously choose a candidate that they want to support, to register to vote, and also get their friends and families and other colleagues to vote as well. So that's a typical day for me.
That's a lot. And just in that, you hit on a lot of the things we want to ask you about. So I'm glad that you kind of put that right out there. Are you burned out?
No.
Oh, okay. You gave a long list. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I'm a burn nurse, so
right.
I'm used to juggling many balls in the air. Because you never could tell. One of the things that was always a big challenge for us, you never could tell when you pick up the phone, how many admissions you were going to get. It could be one, it could be, multiple. So, I'm still sort of in that mode to adapt and, go with the flow.
That's wonderful. So Glad you're not burned out. So I'll
Yeah.
start with the burnout and resiliency question, since that's kind of
Okay.
what our episode was about today.
Sure.
So what do you feel that health systems are doing, or what should they do to address burnout for nurses, and not just put it on the nurse themselves to be resilient? What do you think that should look like?
Well, that's a great question. And before I answer that, let me provide a little bit of supporting data, because as I mentioned, we do surveys every other month. And so our second survey that we did was indicating that nurses are succumbing to a lot of emotional stress, actually PTSD. There was a report of not sleeping or sleeping too long, not eating or eating too much, or the fact that they couldn't process so many deaths that were happening, on their shifts. And, by the fact that, you no sooner had a death to occur, then you had to turn right back around, fill that bed with someone else who was waiting in the ER for that particular bed. And even on their days off, they were just, reporting a lot of emotional stress and strain. So, I think what a lot of, healthcare facilities need to do is to set up some way for nurses to, to be able to express that, hey, I'm drowning here, or I need some help, or, I need to talk to someone. As healthcare professionals, we're in a way, I think we're worse than the military. You know how in the military is considered, I guess, a cop-out, if you will, for lack of a better term, to admit that you need help. You're considered weak. For us in healthcare, it's sort of that way as well. We're great at looking at the mental health needs of others, but when it comes to ourselves or our colleagues, we sort of fail in that particular area. So I think what systems need to do is put in, or healthcare facilities need to do, is put in some sort of a system whereby people can begin to identify these little small things that are slowly building up. If you notice that an employee is maybe habitually late, or they report, I didn't get to sleep last night, or this is the third or fourth night in a row that I haven't been able to sleep the full 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever. Those should be little red flags that normally we would probably, let pass. But, and of course, when it begins to spill over into their work as well, you see medication errors, you see that they're really quick tempered, things of this sort, then we need to be able to have a system to step in and say, instead of you're working in the ICU today, why don't we, maybe if we can, rotate you out and let you do something that's a little less strenuous? Or what are you doing to meet your own, health needs? Talk to me about what resources you may have at home. Is there anyone at home that you can talk to, in particularly, or maybe, if necessary, I hate to, to draw this picture like this, but maybe have like a booth where you can go in and talk to somebody who's a mental health specialist. If you want to do it anonymously, like with confessions, then, then fine, do that. But I think getting that off your chest is a great way to do that. And one of the ways that they can perhaps begin to trigger that, I know that for some hospitals, when staff is reporting to work, they are still doing the temperature checks and things like that. So you can meet them at the door at that particular point, and maybe just, maybe ask them, quick little questions such as, did you sleep well last night? Or, how are things going? Or, find something that may trigger that, and like how when you're going through security at the airport and you're randomly selected, well, maybe they should randomly select, employees as they're going in and say, hey, come over here, let's have a little talk for, a couple of minutes. And then if you begin to sense that, this person may need some assistance, perhaps refer them or talk to their supervisor and say, so-and-so may need to, have a side conversation with some of our mental health specialists or something. So.
Yes, I love it. Just engage more, be more present with
absolutely,
your
absolutely, and let them know that there's no shame in this. That we're looking out for your health, because your health, also translates into more efficiency on on the work environment. It cuts down on mistakes, things of that sort. And of course, it also lets other employees know that, hey, they really care about me here. Maybe, I should take advantage of a service that's being offered, as opposed to, going home and, maybe taking it out on, God knows, what else, maybe another family member, a pet, or, or maybe even just taking a stick and hitting a tree, to get your anger out. It may feel good to you, but I'm sure the tree is probably hurting too. But it is some way to, to let them know we've got to find some way to tackle that, that aggression or the, the mental angst that you're experiencing.
And what a culture change. I mean, I think of nursing culture, the status quo is suck it up and go, and not talk about it and the stigma. So I appreciate that so much. And we're beginning to see the heavy lift that it takes to shift that culture and make it okay.
And one of the things along those lines, Tim, is that, for nursing for so long, we are programmed, if you will, to just take in so much, and take in everyone else's issues and problems and et cetera, that we fail to see how this is affecting us. And also, normally we're great at functioning under crisis, but this is a crisis we don't see the end of, right now. Even though we may have the promise of a vaccine, most disasters, they happen. People come together, they triage, they do this, they do that, and usually within 24 to 48 hours, you're back to some form of normalcy. Here, we're going on 8 months now, 7 or 8 months, and we still don't see the end of it. So to have that, to continue to just linger and not know when is this going to end, that plays a huge factor too in the fatigue and stress and emotional problems that people may be experiencing.
Absolutely. And the call for strong ongoing leadership more than ever, which I'd like to ask kind of a follow-up question along those lines. Dr. Grant is the 36th president of the ANA, the third African-American president of the ANA, and the first male president of the ANA. Can you share a little bit about what leadership is in this space, also being male and the third African-American president? Share with us anything that you can.
And don't sugarcoat it. Don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah, this is the real talk episode.
This is the nurses station show. You're at the nurses station. So keep it real.
I'm keeping it real. Okay.
Put down your fountain drink at the station and let them dish it.
That's a great question, Tim. And I guess probably for me, one is realizing that, okay, I'm in my first year, so it was 122 years actually when I broke the glass ceiling, if you will. The thing that that I have to realize and still do is that everything you do is going to be closely scrutinized, no matter what. Serving as the first male, but also being an African American in this position too, because you have to prove, in essence, that you're worthy, of this. When you consider that of the 122 years, I can only think of, I think 3 times maybe that men may have ran for this position and lost terribly, to say the least. But then to have a minority to win, and in particularly, people can't tell it, but I'm 6'5", right? So I'm this big, imposing figure, and I realize sometimes I can use my height to my advantage, and sometimes not. But to to realize that, okay, everything you do is being scrutinized from different perspectives. One, the fact that you're a male. 2, the fact that you're a Black male, and and how you will go about exerting your leadership skills, and how people may view you, or how you're going to get along with people, and so I have to take that in consideration with just about everything that I do, and really get them to understand that I'm no different than anyone else. My skin color may be different or whatever, but I still have the same philosophy or ideas and things, which is to want the best for the association, to want the best for the nursing profession, but also let's implement some changes too. Like one of my first priority as president is to increase the diversity within nursing. So that within itself, when you look at an organization or a profession that is, depending on who you read, anywhere from 88 to about 90% female, mostly white, you know, and then you have this big imposing 6'5" black guy coming in and saying, "Oh, we're going to change all this." Yeah, we're going to meet with some resistance a little bit. But to try to get people to understand what I'm saying is nursing should be more reflective of the people that we care for. And in order to do that, then we need to invite and open the doors and invite more people of color and minorities to come in and consider this as a profession. I had a talk earlier with some of the students on the diversity and inclusion committee. And one of the things that we talked about was, how do we go about implementing that change? Well, one, it starts with textbooks. You know, they should be, you know, should not be stereotypical of, you know, this culture or that culture and et cetera, which subsequently would lead to a change in the NCLEX questions so that we're all just aren't you know, looped into one particular category. And I know Dean McCauley has done an excellent job of, you know, she sent out a letter about a month ago or 6 weeks ago to the ANA and Association of Colleges of Nursing as well, to textbooks companies to say, you need to start, you know, reevaluating the materials that you're putting out. And subsequently, that's going to drive a change for the NCLEX. And I would go one step further to say that it actually needs to start at the elementary school level, you know, because that's where the impression is made to kids that, okay, if you want to be a nurse, it's a female. You know, maybe it's you know, it's just a white, blonde hair, blue-eyed, you know, individual, because that's what they see on TV, you know, being displayed. But I'm one of those change agents in that another organization that I belong to, we have adopted an elementary school, and you know, about once a month or so, I may go in and, you know, help kids, you know, like with their reading skills and things like that. And they see that I'm a nurse. This 6'5" black guy is a nurse. So maybe there's a little black boy or Hispanic boy who's saying, well, gee, maybe I can consider nursing as a career, because if he can do it, why can't I? Or go to the Boys and Girls Club of America and get them, you know, when they're talking about STEM classes, to think of nursing, because we use all those curricula as well for, you know, for our profession, to think of nursing as a STEM course that, you know, maybe some of the boys or minority girls would like to consider, but never thought about, you know, but it's a great way to apply all that across the board as well. So I hope that that sort of answers your questions, but you know, you sort of got me on my soapbox there.
Thank you. That more than answered it. Yeah.
That was great, because I think diversity, we do need to become more diverse. And I was inspired to become a nurse. I'm Hispanic, and I had never thought that I could be a nurse until someone told me that I could be a nurse. So that's great. You talked about being scrutinized as a leader, president of the ANA. And, you know, like I said, I'm an early career nurse scientist. I'm an immigrant. I was previously undocumented for like 14 years. I'm Latina. The last 4 years for me have been a very difficult time of my life, because I've seen like rollbacks on EPA regulations and actions on climate change, restriction on transgender rights. You know, as you mentioned, a dismal response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is really affecting frontline nurses, racism, anti-immigration policies that are putting children in cages, and just recently, last week, the recent allegations of unwarranted hysterectomies on women in ICE, all of which are disproportionately affecting communities of colors. In other words, your community, my community. It seems to me that this is the most important time for nurses as the most trusted profession to lead change based on the evidence at hand and use the power of advocacy to protect the lives of so many. So I wanted to know, how do you feel as the president of the ANA that the board of directors of the ANA has made the decision to not endorse a presidential candidate since 1984? And what do you think these repercussions of not taking a stand against the Trump administration may lead to for these harmful policies?
Okay, that's a great question. And first of all, let me say that we have not we have taken a stand. Just last week we posted a statement about the unwarranted hysterectomies. I personally have written letters to members of Congress about children and women and minorities being held at the border. I've even volunteered to go and inspect these places, and still waiting on an answer for that. So please don't get the impression that we're just sitting there and letting this happen. We are not. We are, addressing these issues in a number of ways, mainly either with members of Congress that we're able to, try to get the doorway open on both sides of the fence, both Republicans and Democrats, and also with various federal agencies such as Health and Human Services and et cetera. Even though it feels like our cries are falling on deaf ears, we are letting them know that this is not acceptable. Now, regarding the the stance of not taking or not endorsing doing a presidential endorsement. ANA started the presidential endorsement process back in 1985, as you mentioned, and in 2019, the Membership Assembly, which is our highest governing body, voted to rescind that particular action and replace that with a presidential engagement process. And part of that engagement process was to be that nurses would go to either RN Action or nursesvote.org, identify the presidential candidate or any other candidate that's running for office, because the way that is listed, it goes not only for presidents, but any other elected offices, even in your state, all the way down to your city councilman and mayor. So you just put in your zip code and it tells you, these are the people, both Republicans and Democrats, and in some cases independents, who are running for a particular office. And the idea being is that you would read their profile, their stance on various healthcare related issues, and you make up your own decision as to who you're going to choose and vote for. And also at the time, you may want to choose to register to vote, and also get other friends and colleagues and family to vote as well. So the process for to relax the endorsement, it was discussed for 2 years. We held town halls. We created a task force to look into this and et cetera. And at the 2019 Membership Assembly, the members voted by almost 90% to do away with the presidential endorsement process. The rationale being from a number of things. One, ANA is made up of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. Granted, not most, I'd say all the presidential candidates that we had endorsed were Democrats, because they tend to align more with our ideology and or policies or things that we held. But we were hearing increasingly from members, I don't want ANA to tell me who to vote for. Give me the information and let me make the decision myself. On top of that, ANA is one of the few organizations at that time that still did presidential endorsements. Most organizations have ceased doing presidential endorsements because of the division that it may cause among their membership. Again, people needing to recognize that, we're all in this together, per se. The board, when we did our deliberation, and it took quite a while to do that, we reviewed the minutes and the notes from that from all the town hall meetings and things like that was held from the task force. We got a number of emails, mostly from California, encouraging us to do the endorsement, or at least if you looked on the website, there was what people figured or concluded were favorable things regarding President Trump related to healthcare issues, that we should revise that or take it down. A fair number of the emails that we got were not from members. A lot of them were copy and paste from, there was a campaign, if you will, that was started and had asking members to, to send this to the board. So a lot of those were cut and paste. Some of them were not from members. There was a sign-on letter, which had, I think, about 100 and some odd names. A number of those were not from members as well. There was a lot to take into consideration. Finally, though, what the board wound up, looking at was, do you undo the will of the membership assembly, your highest governing body? They spoke overwhelmingly that we do not want this. Yes, the fact that they gave the board the permission to do that, that was a last minute proviso, if you will, that was put in. But the bottom line is the message you would be sending to the board, to membership assembly, that anything that they voted on, the board could easily take away, and that's a pretty onerous thing to have. We had to put aside our own beliefs and because we all were in agreement that yes, the administration has not been very truthful with the public. They have not, done much to protect public health and, things of this sort. But you have to, look at it through this narrow focus of, we're representative of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. They voted overwhelmingly by 90% that we do not want this to happen, and it's a lose-lose situation because if you voted one way, you're gonna have people who would be essentially displeased, and if you voted another way, you're going to have people to be displeased. But the bottom version came down that do you go against the will of the membership assembly? So we are hoping. And hopefully you have seen my follow-up email, open letter to the ANA members, and hopefully that explains things. And hopefully it also explains that the engagement process is doing what it was designed to do, which is to get nurses to become active. And those who are, still critical of the decision, the energy that they're spending, criticizing the board, they could use that energy, turn it inside, and become proactive and, begin to, do work for the Biden campaign. It's a very tough situation to be in, and even, I would say, and as I told the board, this is the most critical decision we will ever make as a board, but having served on not only just nursing boards, but I have also served as chair of several other major boards for, national organizations. You're always reminded that it is the members who govern the organization. And based on that, the fact that the members voted by almost 90%, we don't want this. That was how that decision was made.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Sorry for
much.
the long answer.
No, I actually did read your letter. I actually have it right in front of me. And there was something that did catch my eye that where you said you pledged personally to get out the vote for the candidate you believe is the one that represents your values.
Right.
Would you care to share with us who that candidate is? Your personal candidate?
No. But I think you can pretty well read between the lines. As I said before that, I said that we had to put our own political views aside, and and that was very tough to do. I mean, but I think you can pretty well guess who I most align myself with.
And in alignment with this idea of engagement, you mentioned two websites. I just want to repeat those in case our listeners want to connect. You mentioned RN Action and nursesvote.org. Is that correct? Okay. As ways that we can.
Or they can also go on the ANA website, nursingworld.org, and just type in, do a search for vote, and it will take them to those two sites as well.
Great, nursingworld.org as well. I'd like to put a pitch, if I could, for another voting approach that we can take as we engage. This is my my work badge, but in front is a lanyard that I wear, and I've been wearing for over a month now. It's a program called Vote ER, and it was started by an ER physician who realized in emergency settings, and as an emergency nurse, many of the people that we treat in emergency rooms across the country are disenfranchised. Many are not registered to vote. Many don't know about how they can register to vote or where. Right. So with this program, I wear this lanyard everywhere I go in the health system. And if someone says, "What's up with that lanyard?" I say, I believe in healthcare. I know that my vote counts to how we can change and make healthcare better. Are you registered to vote? And if the person says no, then I hold this up. They use their camera, they take a picture of it, and this links them directly in that state to where they can sign up to vote or where they can register to vote by mail, because we know that that is safe. Yes. So a lot of ways to engage. And
that's the whole engagement process right there, is that you've educated yourself, now you want to educate others. And as I said, we heard overwhelmingly from people, and as I stated earlier too, when this question was asked, ANA does not have the vote. You have the vote. You're the one who, whose vote counts. So, and people would say, I don't want ANA to tell me who to vote for. Give me the information and let me vote, let me make my own decision. And, so that's a great example of, taking that engagement process and going forward and, getting others to, to help, become engaged as well. So. Thanks.
I think this, component of sort of really fully owning our role as nurses, not just in health systems and at work, but in our communities, and using that voice where people can also trust us, because sometimes they're doing that engagement work on their own to find out more information, but they have questions about what this really means for people's health and well-being when they're sick and when they're trying not to be sick. So thanks for that.
So Dr. Grant, we could just talk all day. We would be thrilled to have you back for another episode, because this is not enough time. If you're open to that, maybe we can reach out to you. And
be happy to, anytime.
Okay. So we thank you so much for being here with us today. Again, it's Dr. Ernest Grant for the American Nursing Association. If you have any questions for us or for him, feel free to follow us on our LinkedIn page, or you can find us on www.nursing.emory.edu/the Nurses Station. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We have an Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter. We even have a TikTok, but we hadn't even gotten into it yet. But just give us we'll get Dr. Grant to do a TikTok with us. That'd be pretty neat. So thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.